Hey everybody, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christina Caesar, and I manage marketing and communications at Synergy Technical, and I have the honor of introducing today's speaker and moderating today's session. Today's webinar is Make Sense of Your Data with Power BI. So this is Jeff's third installment in his Power Platform series, who I'll introduce shortly. But just a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded, and please drop any comments or questions in the Q&A function within Teams. And really quick, just a little bit about us. Synergy Technical is an IT consulting firm headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We have clients in over 70 countries and all 50 states, and manage over 3 million licenses of Microsoft 365 for our clients through our licensing and managed services practice. And I wasn't kidding when I said quick. Now I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Jeff Laus. So Jeff is one of our best business analysts and SharePoint developers that specializes in the Power Platform suite. You can usually find him working on client projects and development, but I'm so excited. So this is his, like I said, this is his third installment and live webinar in the Power Platform series that he's doing. He's already presented great content on both how to create no-code chatbots with Power Virtual Agents, as well as creating business applications with Power Automate, which was a lot of words, sorry. But both those recordings can be found on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to if you'd like. And without the introduction, Jeff, I will hand things over to you and we can get things going.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Christina, for that.
I tried to be speedy, isn't it? Yeah, I know we got a lot of great stuff to cover.
Yes, so thank you again. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Jeff Lau, and so really excited to be here today to talk with you about another powerful tool from Microsoft, and that is called Power BI. And so if you've been to my previous webinars, then you might be familiar with the picture that I have displayed here, but this is the Power Platform. And so the Power Platform consists of 4 applications. We have Power BI, which we'll be discussing today, but we also have Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. So in the previous webinars, I went over those other 3 applications, but today we're going to take a deeper dive into Power BI. And so the first thing I want to do is just give you a basic overview of what Power BI is, some core concepts that you should know, and then we'll hop into the much anticipated demonstration, which will give you an idea of what it'll look like if you hop into this tool and start using it yourself. So with all that said, let's go ahead and begin. So the first thing you need to know is what Power BI is. And Power BI is a business intelligence tool that gives you the ability to analyze and visualize your data. If you are familiar with Excel, then there will be a lot of similarities between these tools. You might see some things that are familiar, but Power BI is capable of far more than Excel is really in a category of its own in what it's capable of doing with your data. But the main purpose of Power BI is to give you a better understanding of your data so you can make better business decisions. And so I'm sure you've looked at spreadsheets in the past and maybe have been overwhelmed by the vast amounts of data. You might have hundreds of columns and rows, and you just can't really see anything and kind of make any decisions by just looking at it at a glance. So you need a tool that is able to take in that data and make some kind of sense out of it. And so that's where Power BI comes into play. And so one of the main things you need to understand about Power BI is that it is made up of 2 separate applications. So we have Power BI Desktop, and we also have Power BI Service. And so this often confuses people in the beginning, and they often wonder, which one do I need to use, and when do I need to use each one? And the answer to it is that you'll most likely use both of them at some point in your Power BI project, because each one has its separate purpose. But we'll explain this a little farther when I get into the demonstration. But kind of an overview of the difference between the 2. Power BI Desktop is where you will do the majority of your work. So you'll bring in all the data that you're trying to analyze and visualize. You'll bring all that into the Power BI Desktop. And so once you have that data inside the tool, you might have to do some cleanup to it, some transformations, and then of course you'll create those visualizations in the desktop app as well. But then you might ask the question, what is Power BI Service? And so Power BI Service is the component of Power BI that lives in the cloud. So this is actually the tool that you will upload all of your work to. And then from there, you can start to share it out to other people. So maybe you want to share all your reports and dashboards with some colleagues, or you can also, maybe you want to share with some external users as well, maybe some customers. You can do that with the Power BI service. One of the main things that you can do in Power BI service is create something called workspaces. And these are basically containers that will hold all of the work that you create in Power BI. And so you create these workspaces, you upload all of your work to it, and then you can maybe invite some of your colleagues into this workspace to collaborate with you. Another thing that you can do with the Power BI service is create something we call dashboards. And if you look at the picture here, this is just an example of a dashboard that you might create. But a dashboard is one page of visuals that you can create basically based off all the reports that you make. So you might have 10 to 20 reports that you create in Power BI. And what you can do is create a dashboard that just holds, the most important visuals. And so you might want to give this to an executive to kind of show off a summary of all the reports. And that's what you'll do with these dashboards. And so we'll make one of these when we get into the demonstration. So the next thing I want to talk about is the different phases that you will experience whenever you enter a Power BI project of your own. So you'll typically go through each one of these 4 phases. And so we have data discovery, data modeling, data visualization, and sharing. And so what I want to do is kind of give you a brief kind of description of each one of these phases. But as you'll see in the demo, we'll be touching on each one of these and go through each one as we go through the demo. But the data discovery phase is the phase in which you discover the data that you are going to be using within Power BI. So for instance, you might have a couple Excel spreadsheets that you want to bring in. You might have some data in a SQL database or something like that. This is the phase where you figure out where that data is so you can connect to it and bring that data in. The second phase is the data modeling phase. In this phase, once you have all of your data inside of Power BI, most likely your data will not be clean. There'll need to be some work that you need to do to your data to make it good, so you can start creating some visualizations around your data. So this is the phase where you'll go ahead and clean up. You might have some empty rows in your data, as you'll see in the demonstration. You might want to make some changes like the headers of your columns and stuff like that. In this phase, you'll also create relationships between your tables. And so that is a very big component of Power BI, is creating kind of this data model. The third phase, which tends to be everyone's favorite phase of Power BI, is creating these really cool visualizations. And there are so many visualizations that you can choose from, as you'll see in just a bit. But that is definitely my favorite phase because it's kind of fun to create these cool visualizations. And actually Power BI has the ability to, you can actually have developers create these visualizations. So over time, more visualizations will come into the tool and you can explore those. But that's that phase. The last phase is just the sharing phase. So once you create all of these reports and dashboards, you can go ahead and upload those up to the Power BI service, and then you can start collaborating with different users. And so if you're familiar with the Power Platform and you have been to my previous webinars, you will know that these tools integrate very well with each other. So Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, they all have very good integration. They were created to be able to do that. But if you look in this picture, here we have a Power BI report with some visuals. If you look closely though, in the center, you'll see that we actually have a Power App that is embedded inside of this report. So users can not only look at these really awesome visuals, but they can also utilize a Power App right within the report itself. So really cool stuff there. One of my favorite integrations with Power BI is using Power Automate within a dashboard. And so if you're not familiar with Power Automate, that's completely fine. This webinar is not focused on that, but Power Automate allows you to create business process workflows. So you can automate a bunch of different tasks that you tend to do on a daily basis. And so I will actually show you and in the demonstration how we can utilize Power Automate within Power BI. And so it's a little more of a complex topic, but if you know me, I kind of like to add at least one of these to my webinars to kind of make things a little more interesting and fun for you guys. So with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and hop into the demonstration so you can see this tool in action. So we'll go ahead and hop over to Power BI here. And so this is what Power BI looks like when you first open the tool. If you are familiar with other Office 365 applications like PowerPoint, Word, or Excel, then most likely this will look a little familiar because a lot of things are the same. So if you look up at the top here, you can see some of these tabs like the Home, Insert, and View tab. These are very similar things that you'll see in other Office apps. But the first thing I want to do is show you the data that we're going to be working with today. So what I'll do is I will open that up real quick. And so we're going to be working with two different Excel spreadsheets today. And what I want to do is just open these up and kind of show you around and what they look like so you'll know what we're working with today. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up our sales table. So you can see we have a table here with a bunch of different columns. And so each one of these rows in this table represents an order that one of our customers has created. And so in this particular example, we're actually selling toy motorcycles and cars. As you can see in this field here, this is the product line that we're selling. But we have fields like the order number, the quantity ordered, so how many items did our customer order at one time. We have the price of each, and then a bunch of other fields related to that order. So that's the sales worksheet we're going to be working with. We also have one other Excel that we're going to be working with as well. Go ahead and open this up. And so in this table, we have all the different customers that are purchasing our items. So each one of these rows is a different customer, and then we have some information about our customers as well. This field right here, this is the customer ID. So this is a very important field in this particular table because it uniquely identifies each one of our customers. So you can see each customer has a number that represents itself. And so if I go back to my sales table, we can see that this table also contains that field, customer ID. So this is kind of how these tables can connect to each other and relate to one another. And this will be very important when we start to bring these into Power BI and kind of create that relationship between the tables. But now that you have a better idea of what our data looks like, I'm going to make sure I close that Excel. But now that you have a better idea of the data, let's go ahead and bring it into Power BI. So if we go up to the Home tab here, there's this button called Get Data. And here you can see a bunch of different common data sources that you can connect to. And if I click on that More button, we can see that there are a bunch of different sources that you can connect to. So no matter where your data is and where your data lives, there's a good chance that Power BI will be able to connect to it. All right, so if we look up here again, we'll see a button that we call Excel Workbook. And this is actually a dedicated button that Power BI has to connect to your Excel spreadsheets. So what I'll do is I'll just select that. We see our two tables here. We're going to connect to our sales table first and bring in that data. So I'll give it a second to load here. And so this is where you'll choose the table within your spreadsheet. So sometimes you might have an Excel with a bunch of different tables, and this is where you actually select which table that you want to bring in. So we want to bring in the sales table. And if you look here, we actually get a preview of what the data looks like before we actually bring it in. And so what we can do, if you look down here, we have a couple different buttons, load and transform. If your data is clean and ready to bring in, then you can push load, but more than likely, whenever you bring in data into Power BI, the data does not look how you want it. There's going to be issues in some regard. So if you actually look here, we can see that we have a bunch of rows that say null, which mean they're blank. And what we need to do is we need to clean that up and make it so those don't exist, because they will start to affect our visualizations when we start creating those. So it's important that we have clean data. So what we need to do is push this transform data button here. And so what this will do is it'll open up what we call the Power Query Editor. And so if you're familiar with Excel, then this also exists within there, but this is going to allow us to do a bunch of different transformations to our data before we're ready to actually start working with it. All right, so again, you'll see we have a bunch of empty rows. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and get rid of those. And so if I go up to my home tab here, it's a bunch of different transformations that we can choose from. But there's this remove rows button, which sounds exactly what we need to do. So I'll select that. A couple different options here, but there's this one that says remove blank rows. And so I'm going to click that one. And so immediately upon selecting that, we can see that all of those blank rows have been removed. It's exactly what we wanted to do. And if you turn your attention over to this panel here on the right, this is called the Applied Steps panel. And so every time you create some type of transformation to your data, then that step will be written down here. And so this allows you to see everything that you've done so far. And you can also revert back if you do some kind of transformation that you don't actually want. And so you can see that we have this remove blank rows. That's what I just did. I could just X that out and you can see the rows appear again. I'll just do that again. And so what I want to do is do one last transformation before we finish up with the sales table. We can bring it in. If you look, we have this column called order date. And so this gives us the date that each one of these orders took place on. And so what I want to do is right now you can see that we have the date and the time. It looks like the time is just 12 a.m. for all of them. So maybe we just want to get rid of the time altogether. What I can do is I can make sure that my column is selected. I can right click and go down to transform. And then I have a bunch of different options on what I can do with this column. So the first one is actually the one that we are looking for, and it says date only. And if I click that, then our time goes away and we're just left with the date, which is more appropriate because for some reason all of those said 12 a.m. and we don't even need that. All right, so the next thing I want to do is maybe I want to have another column that just contains the year. So how do we go about doing that? Let's first duplicate this order date column. And so I'm going to right click on that column and I can go to duplicate column. And if you see what just happened there, we got a duplicate of that column on the end of this table called order date copy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this over to the original order date field, just so we can have those side by side. And so what I want to do is I want to extract just the year from this date. So again, I can just right click on this field, go down to transform again. And here I could select the year, the quarter, the month, the week. I have a bunch of different transformation options, but I want to get the year. So I'm just going to go to year and select that. And so now you see that we just have the year, and it applied to every one of our rows in this column here. I'm also going to rename this field the word year. And so you might wonder why we created this column in the first place, but it'll come in handy a little later when we create a visualization based off of this field. But I think our data is looking a lot better than it did before. We cleaned up all those rows that were empty, and I think we're ready to go ahead and apply all of those changes. So we can go up to the left side of the Home tab here, and it says Close and Apply. I'll just click that. Give it a second to load.
While it's loading, Jeff, just to let you know, I did put the links to your the first two in your series in the chat as you were speaking about them, because apparently I can't stop talking about how great our YouTube channel is.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, definitely check out those videos, those webinars. They were really great.
They were. You crushed it.
All right. Well, it typically doesn't take this long. Sorry about this, guys. But hopefully we can load this in.
Every once in a while, technology. It's just technology's fun. It's temperamental. It works, but it hates us.
Yes, indeed. All right, here we go. I think it's because I have so much open on my computer right now.
Well, and you did say for this webinar though, and for this demo, I know you had to take so many different screens that you were jumping between and like sharing with you have a lot open on this one. The bandwidth I get. I
think we're good though. There we go.
You got it.
All right, so we've loaded that data in there. And so now I kind of want to show you these three tabs on the left-hand side here. So we have three different ones. The first one is the report tab. And you can see this is where we're going to start creating our visualizations in just a bit. But you have this blank canvas essentially, and you can start creating all of these cool visuals based on your data. But we'll come back to this tab in just a second. The second tab here is the data tab, and this is where you're going to see all the data that you have brought in to Power BI. So you can see here we have our sales table. And if I click that and open it up, we can actually see all the fields that make up that table. And you can also see the data, of course, here. And the third tab we have right below that is the model tab. So this is going to be where you create your data model. And so right now we just have one table here. So there's no really data model quite yet. But if you remember back when I showed you in the beginning, we actually have two tables we're going to be working with today. And so the next thing we're going to do is simply bring in our customer table. So I'm going to do the same steps as I did before. Go up to the Excel workbook, select our customer table. So again, I'll select that table within the spreadsheet. And so this time, for the sake of this demo, I went ahead and cleaned this data up beforehand. So typically we would go and transform the data and do that cleanup, but since our data is clean already, we can just go ahead and click load. So hopefully that'll be a little quicker. There we go. So you'll notice that in our data model, we see this customer table pop up. And if you see, we actually, Power BI created a relationship between these two tables automatically. And so why is that? If I hover over this relationship, we can see that it highlights the customer ID field. And Power BI is smart enough to recognize that this field, this customer ID field, exists in both of these tables. So it goes ahead and creates that relationship automatically, which is really nice. But sometimes you might have two tables that have a column that is the same, but they might have different names or something like that. And so Power BI might not be able to recognize that those tables need a relationship. So I'm just going to delete this relationship and kind of show you that you can manually create the relationship as well if Power BI doesn't automatically do it for you. So what you can do is go to that customer ID field, and I can grab that and I can just drag it over to the other field, or the other customer ID field in this table. And if I drop that, we can see that that relationship gets created. You can always manually create the relationships as well. Power BI doesn't do it. But there we go. We have our connection between these two tables, and we're really ready to continue. So I'm going to head back to the data tab here. And the first thing we're going to do is create something called a calculated column. And so if you look here, we have two fields, one called quantity ordered, which again is, how many items did our customer order in one, or place in one order, and then we have the price of each of those items. So maybe we want to figure out the revenue the revenue for each one of these orders. So what we can do is create a column, a calculated column, that of course multiplies the quantity ordered times the price each, and then we can have a column with all of those values. So if I go up to the top here, I can create a new column. That's what we want to do. Okay, and you can see that a new column has been added to the end of our table. And if you look up at the top, we actually have an expression bar. So what we can do is go ahead and type in an expression that will calculate our quantity ordered times the price, which will give us our revenue. And so these expressions uses something called DAX, and DAX stands for data analysis expressions. And so Microsoft created this expression language, just for Power BI, so we could create these calculations and create these calculated columns. So what I'll do is I can actually rename this column, and I'll just call it revenue. And now we need to create an expression that'll calculate those two fields. So the first thing we want to do is we need to reference the table in which these fields are located in. And if you remember, that is the sales table. So I just start typing in sales table. We can see that Power BI has something called IntelliSense that will actually give us all the fields in the sales table that we can choose from. So if the first one we're going to choose is quantity ordered. And what I can do is I can use an asterisk to denote multiplication, because we need to multiply those two fields together. Again, I can type in sales table, and then we'll get our price of each item. All right, so now we have the expression we're looking for, and what I can do now is just click enter. And so what you'll see is that that expression has been evaluated for each one of our rows here in our table. And so we can see that revenue in each one of these rows. And so maybe I want to make this look a little better, since this is a currency value. What we can do is we can change the format of this column. So if I click on the column and go up to the top, make sure I have a format button that I can go and change it to currency. And now you see that we have that dollar sign and we have commas within our numbers. So that's looking a lot better. All right, so now we've created a calculated column. If you look up at the top here, we can create calculated columns. We can also create something called measures, and we'll come back to that a little later. But what I want to do is go ahead and head over to the report view and start creating some visualizations. So if you look over here, we can see that we have both of our tables. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab that revenue column that we just created. And I'm just going to drag and I'm going to drop it onto our canvas here. And so you can see right when I do that, Power BI creates this bar graph visualization. by default here. And if I hover over the bar, we can see that it's going to show us the total revenue of all of our orders in this bar graph. And so that's cool. You might want to know the revenue of all of the orders within that sales table, but maybe you want to see the revenue of each customer. And so what we can do is we can go over to our customer table, and I can simply just grab our customer name and drag that and drop that into my visual. Okay, so now we can see the revenue by our customer, which is really neat. That tells us a little bit more about our data. And so if I hover over these bars, we can actually see the individual revenues of each customer. If I click on my visual and I come over to these visualizations here, I can actually change the visual to a different one. There's a couple different options here that you can choose from. There's also this button called Get More Visuals, and you could actually go and download visuals from the Microsoft website. But you can go ahead and change this to different visuals and just find the one that you like best. You can also format the visual a little more detailed, a little more granularly, like maybe want to change the colors of the bars. I could go to columns here, and I could change it to maybe just pink. So there's a lot of things that you can do to your visuals to make it personal to you and make it look a lot more customized. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create another visual, and this visual is going to be called a slicer. And so maybe we want to slice this data by the order date year. And so if you remember back when we brought in our sales data initially, we created that field called order date year. And we can see it's right here. And so I'm just going to bring that in and drop it onto my canvas. And so as you can see, by default, it gives us this this column here. And if I hover over it, we see that it's actually totaling up all the order date years, and that doesn't really tell us much. What we need to do is change this to a slicer visual. So I'm going to go over to visuals and I'll change it to a slicer. And I'll bring it over here, put it above this visual. And so now you can see that we can actually change the range of our years here, and that will impact our other visual. So you can see maybe we just want to see the data from 2020 and 2021. You can see that when I do that, our visual changes here. So now we see all of our revenue from those years. Maybe I want to just see 2020. You can do that as well. Also, if I go to this slicer visual, I can actually change it to, maybe I want it to be like a checkbox for our user to click on. So now I could go to 2022, I could select that. Maybe I want 2020 as well. And there you go. So really cool stuff there, how you can slice your data by the year. All right, so what I want to do is create one last visual on our report here. And so the first thing we're going to do is go back to our data view. And so the visual I want to create is I want to create a visual that tells us the total orders that are in our sales table. So essentially, how many rows do we have here in this table? And so the first thing we need to do is we need to create a measure that calculates that. So I'm going to go up to the top here and I'm going to click New Measure. Okay, and I'm going to give my measure a name. I'm going to call this total orders. And just like a calculated column, I'm going to use a DAX expression to give me the calculation that I'm looking for. And so we want to have an expression that will essentially count all of the rows in this table. So there is a function in DAX called count rows. So I'll just simply type that function in, and we can see that it wants a table. And so we're going to use the sales table, right? So I'll just type that in. And then I can close that count rows function with a parentheses. And then I will press enter. All right, so if you look on our sales table here, you can see that that total orders measure has been created. And you might wonder, why isn't that a column? And so we have calculated columns and we also have measures, and there is a difference between the two. So whenever we want to have our expression be evaluated on a row by row basis, just like we needed that to happen when we created the revenue, we wanted to find the revenue for each one of these rows. But for measures, we don't need to calculate that on a row by row basis. We just want to do this calculation for our entire sales table. So measures are really for aggregations, while calculated columns are for when we want to evaluate an expression on a row to row basis. So that's really the difference between the two. All right, so I'm going to head back to our report view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go get that total orders measure that we just created. And I'm going to drop that onto our canvas. And again, it gives us this bar graph called total orders. And if I hover over the bar, we can see that it looks like we have 62 total orders in our table. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this visual to a card visual. So I'm going to go over here, change it to a card. Just have it look like that. All right, and so just like these visuals interact with each other, this one also can interact as well. So maybe I want to go over to this visual and drill down into the gift depot incorporated customer. I can select that. We can see that it looks like we have 14 total orders for that particular customer, and we could do the same thing for each one of these. All right, so now we've created some visuals on our report. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the name of this report. If I go down, by default, it just says page 1. I'm just going to call it sales report. Right. And so the last step for us to do is to upload this report to the Power BI service. But before I do that, I want to show y'all something real quickly that I have created. And I briefly mentioned this when we were in the slides, but I'm actually going to show you how I incorporated Power Automate into Power BI. And so here I actually created this report, but I also created a new page called delayed orders. So we'll give this just a minute to load up. Okay, and so here we have a title called delayed orders. I have a table here with a bunch of information about my orders, like the order number, customer name, order date. And we also have the status of the order as well. So whether it has been shipped or it's in the delayed status. And we also have a customer email as well. Not every customer has an email address, but we do have a couple down here with email addresses. And if you see, we have this visual here, which actually is displaying the total amount of delayed orders in our table. But the really cool and fascinating part about this report is that we have this button here. And this is actually a Power Automate button right within our report. And so what a user can do when they come into this report is they can select one of these orders that are delayed. So they might select this one. And what they can do is click this send email button right within the report. And what it'll do is it'll send an email to this customer saying that their order has been delayed and it will not arrive on time. So I'm actually going to click on this button here. And I kind of want to show you what is happening behind the scenes, what this workflow is actually, what it actually looks like. So I'll go into edit. And this is actually going to open up Power Automate right within my report, which is really cool. And again, if you're not familiar with Power Automate, this is going to allow us to create like business process workflows. And so that's what I've created here. I created this workflow called send email. I'm just going to open this up. Okay, and so here's the workflow that is taking place when a user selects that button inside of the report. So we can see the first thing is our trigger, which it says on Power BI button clicked. So whenever a user selects that, that's going to kick off our workflow. And we can see we have this action step right here within the workflow called send customer email. And so there are a couple different properties of this email action here. We have who's the email going to. If I hover over this, we can see that it's actually grabbing the customer email from that table on our report. We also have the subject, order delayed, and then we have the body of the email itself. Just saying that the order is going to be delayed, it also includes the order date, the order number, and it just says sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, and so that's the workflow that is taking place whenever a user selects this button inside of our report. So what I want to do is kind of just demonstrate this and show you how it works. So again, a user can select one of these delayed items inside the report, and then they can select the send email button here. And so what that should have done is send an email to this customer email here. And what I have is actually have that email opened up so we can see if that email was sent successfully. And there it is. It says order delayed, and then we'll open up. And there's our body that we saw when we opened up the workflow. So really cool stuff. And I just thought that would be interesting to kind of show you how this works. Again, it's a little more complex, but you can see how amazing this can be. The fact that we can just incorporate Power Automate within Power BI, and you can probably think of a bunch of different use cases that you could use this for. But this is just one that I found really cool. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to upload the report that we created into the Power BI service. So I actually have the Power BI service opened up here already. And so we can see there's a bunch of different tabs on this side. We're not going to go through these today. What we're interested in is workspaces right down here. And so again, workspaces are those containers in which we can begin to upload all of our work to, and then we can start collaborating with others. So here we can see a couple different workspaces that I'm already a part of. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new workspace. And I'll just call this Contoso workspace. We could also give it a description if we'd like. And I'm just going to go ahead and save it. All right, so here we have that new workspace that we created. Of course, there's no content in there quite yet, but there will be once we upload our report. So I'm going to head back over to our report that we created in Power BI. And here we are. And if we go up to this Home tab, we can see we have a button called Publish. So I'm just going to select that. And so the first thing it wants us to do is save our changes. So we'll click Save. And so what this is doing is actually saving to our local machine here. So I'm just going to call this Contoso Sales Report. And I'll save it. And so the next thing it wants us to do is select the workspace in which we want to upload this report to. And if you remember, we just created a workspace called Contoso Workspace. And so that's the one I'm going to select. Okay, Power BI will do its thing and upload this report to that workspace, and it says success. All right, so we'll go ahead and head back over to Power BI service here. And you can see instantly, right when I did that, we now have our report inside of our workspace. So you can see that we have the report here, but we also have the data set. So all of the tables that we've used in Power BI Desktop also gets uploaded to the service, so we could view those as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into our report. So this should load our report for us, and here it is. So just like we saw in our Power BI Desktop, it shows up exactly the same in our Power BI service, and I can interact with the visuals here just the same. All right. And so then the thing I mentioned in the slide deck is that we could create something called dashboards. And again, dashboards are that one-page view of some of the visuals that you select. So we're going to go ahead and create a dashboard using some of the visuals. So we'll just go to this one, and if I look up at the top, we'll see that we have something called Pin Visual. So if I click on that, I can actually pin this visual to a dashboard. You can pin it to an existing one if you have one. We actually need to create one because we don't have any. So we're going to create a new dashboard. I'm going to call it Contoso Sample Dashboard. And what I'll do is I will pin this visual to that. So you see we got a notification saying that it was pinned to the dashboard. I'm just going to X this out because I also want to pin this visual to the dashboard as well. I can go to this and I can pin it. This time we actually have one that already exists, so I'll just pin it to that same one. And now what I'll do is I'll go to the dashboard. Okay, so now you see that we have our dashboard here with those two visuals that we pinned. And again, you might have, say, 20 different pages on your report, and you just want to get the main visuals and you want to show those to somebody. So this gives you the ability to do that. And you can also change the size of all these and just make it look exactly how you want it to. Another cool functionality is this thing called Ask a Question about your data. And so if I click on this, I can actually ask a question. I could type in a question if I'd like, but they also give you some suggestions that you can actually select. So maybe I want to see what are the total orders by city. And so if I select that question, Power BI actually creates a visual that answers the question for me. And so here we can see we have the total orders by city, and I can hover over these bars and actually see what those total orders are. And so really cool. I didn't have to do anything to create this visual. Power BI created it for me. And so maybe I want to pin this new visual to my dashboard. I can go up to Pin Visual, and I can select that. And so now we see that visual that Power BI just created for me, and I can move that around and do whatever I want with it. So that's one of the coolest things about these dashboards is you can have Power BI actually create these visuals kind of ad hocly for you. All right, so the last thing I want to do, I'm going to go back to our report, or actually our workspace rather, and maybe I want to bring in one of my colleagues to help collaborate with me. Maybe I want to give them the ability to create dashboards around this data as well. What I can do is on this workspace, I can go to this tab called Access, and I can simply type in the email address of my colleague. So I'll just type in her name. Her name is Adele. I can select that. I can give her the role, so I can make her an administrator or a member. just make her a member and I will add her. Okay, I actually have Adele's Power BI page pulled up here. So if I refresh that and go down to her workspaces, we'll see that she has been added to the Contoso workspace. And now she can go in and click into that. And so she can view all the stuff that we've created, and of course she can start creating dashboards herself. So that's an easy way you can start collaborating with other colleagues. I'm going to go back to my Power BI here. And so another way we could share this stuff is by going into maybe, let's say, the report. There is this button at the top called Share. And so I can click that and I could type in my colleague's email address here, maybe add a message, and I could send this report to them. And I can also just make it so they can view it. And so they won't actually have the ability to create anything within this workspace. Maybe we just want them to have access to this report. This is the way you can do that. All right, so that's really all I have for you guys today on Power BI. I really hope this kind of gave you a better understanding of this tool, and maybe you get excited to kind of work with this tool, in your organization or personally. But yeah, I'm sure you got some questions for me, Christina, that might have popped up in the chat.
I'm ready. I'm excited.
Cool.
So we're kicking things off actually very strong. So typically Power BI is used to dashboard or display business data, but you don't modify the source. Can Power Automate within Power BI be used to modify the source of the data? I'm gonna be honest, I had to reread that one a couple times, the wording.
Yeah, read that one more time for me.
All right, so typically Power BI is used to dashboard or display business data, but you don't modify the source. Can Power Automate within Power BI be used to modify the source of the data?
I definitely understand the question, but I can't say that I've done that before within Power Automate. But I wouldn't be surprised.
As soon as I read that,
with
I was like, I would be happy to connect.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you could do that with Power Automate. That seems like something that could definitely be done. But I would be interested and curious myself if you could do that.
So how is the data in the dashboard updated?
Okay, so okay, that's a good question.
Within the Power BI,
Yeah, so if you make changes in the Power BI report, like to those visuals or whatever, it will make the changes in the dashboards behind the scenes. It's all connected together.
Okay. And then, so can you reuse the data set shown in the service for other reports without recreating the data set? So can a single data set feed multiple reports?
Yes. Yes, it can.
Yes. Okay. And then I got some fun ones. Oh, I love these because they're always like the how to get started questions. Is Power BI free to use? And oh wait, yes. Is Power BI free to use? And are there any licensing requirements?
Yeah, so licensing is definitely a conversation to be had with Power BI, but is it free? That's a good question. There is a free license that you can use with Power BI, and anyone can use a free license, and that gives you the ability to use both Power BI Desktop and Power BI Service. However, there are limitations around that free license, and it really kind of goes around actually sharing all this out to other people and kind of having that collaboration. And you won't be able to do that with the free license. It's really, I would say the free license is more revolves around personal use of Power BI, and you kind of lose all that collaboration.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so, see, actually, I like this one because how you went through, and compliments to you all, thank you before, because I know we have really quick minutes, like, thank you, Jeff, that was so much like deep dive content. And I can't, is Power BI supported by mobile device? Like, can you actually do this on a phone? I can't picture this on a phone. That seems very in-depth.
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, you wouldn't be able to think you would be able to see all of these reports
Yeah.
and dashboards on such a small device, right? Yeah, but it actually is. It's actually available on all the main operating systems, so Windows, Android, iOS, or whatever. So you can actually download the app from the App Store. And so just like you can access these reports and dashboards on a desktop, you can view them on a mobile device, and it'll kind of render to that screen size. And I've used it personally, and you can actually see these these visuals very well on a mobile device too. So, and of course you can share with others using the mobile device as well. Yeah, so that's definitely doable.
That shocks me, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the one I thought I was reading at the time. So are there any free resources for learning how to use Power BI or just how to get started with it?
Yes, yeah, for sure. So Microsoft actually has a dedicated place there. It's called Microsoft Learn. I actually have a link to that that I can add, or if you want to add that link, there's actually
the Microsoft Learn for Power BI specifically, or Power Platform?
Yeah. You can actually go to the main page of Microsoft Learn to get to just the specific.
Yeah. I'll drop that in the chat right now. Hold on.
Yeah, that is, I would say, the main place to start out, because Microsoft has created that, so they have a lot of the Power BI developers actually going in and creating that documentation and those learning modules. So I would start there. I've definitely done those, and they're really great. But there's also a bunch of other resources online that you can find, such as videos, like YouTube videos and stuff like that. But if you're really curious about learning Power BI, you definitely won't have a lack of resources, that's for sure.
And then I think there was one more. So, and this one also might be one that we is very helpful. So if one of the delayed deliveries is now delivered, how does that show up in the dashboard? I think.
Yeah, so I mean, if the data has been changed, like in that Excel workbook that that we saw, if that changes, then the data will needs to be refreshed inside of Power BI, and once it gets refreshed, then you'll see that change in that delayed report.
Okay. Awesome. So we don't have any more questions right now. Those were all great questions, and this was Jeff again. Thank you so much. I know we're literally right on the dot, so I'll be really quick. Thank you so much for everyone for attending today. You will receive a follow-up email of the recording to this webinar by tomorrow. And in the future, please be sure to keep up with us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, as I don't mean to keep emphasizing, but seriously, like, there's so much great content on that channel. Like, you check it out. And also check our events page for more upcoming webinars. And then if you have any more questions on any of the topics covered today, please reach out to me and I will connect you with Jeff or the appropriate AE. But we would absolutely help you out. And I don't want to keep anyone longer than your lunch break. I hope everyone enjoyed their sandwich, but thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and great weekend. It's almost Friday. So thank you so much, guys. Have a great one.